They say prom night is one of those moments you never forget, but for Sergeant Marcus Williams, a disabled veteran with a knee that never quite healed, it was supposed to be just another evening. The air was electric with the promise of music and laughter, and his daughter, Emily, couldn't wait to dance with her friends under the glittering lights. Marcus had spent months saving up for Emily's tuxedo. Her first formal was a father's badge of honor. Yet as he maneuvered his wheelchair toward the grand entrance, the echo of footsteps around him felt heavier than expected. A security guard stepped in his path, eyes flickering between too polite and too firm, and Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. His heart pounded as he tried to smile past the fatigue. He had faced hardship before. Combat zones, surgeries, and sleepless nights haunted him, but this felt different. This was his daughter's big night, and someone somewhere was trying to deny him that simple joy. Walking her down the aisle of her high school gym, where prom would crown her youth, the words, "I'm sorry, sir, but you can't enter," hovered in the air, and Marcus knew something had to change. Emily stood by the ticket booth, clutching her purse tightly. Her dress, a soft shade of lavender, shimmered under the gym's neon signs. She had spent hours getting ready, hair curled, makeup carefully applied, eager to show her father how proud she was of him. Growing up with a single parent, Emily saw Marcus not only as a dad but as her hero. He had come home from Afghanistan missing part of his hearing and with scars both visible and hidden, yet he'd never let that dampen his spirit. From teaching her how to ride a bike to cheering at every soccer game, Marcus filled her world with unwavering support. Tonight was supposed to be their moment, a memory they would both carry forever. But as she approached the entrance, the sight of her father halted her breath. Marcus's eyes met hers, grateful yet troubled, and she felt her heart tighten. She knew something was wrong the second she saw the guard blocking his path. Earlier that afternoon, Marcus had called the school administration. He'd spoken to Principal Hayes, a woman he respected, explaining that he would need the accessible ramp cleared and assistance finding Emily's table. The principal had seemed sympathetic on the phone, promising everything would be ready. Marcus arranged for a volunteer to meet him at the side entrance, and he tested his wheelchair down the ramp so he wouldn't be late. Yet when he arrived, the ramp was cluttered with folding chairs and stray balloons. The volunteer helper was nowhere in sight. He wheeled himself forward, determined not to miss a second, but the moment he pushed his way through the doors, a security guard stepped up, informing him that a last-minute policy change meant only students and their dates could enter the main hall. Marcus blinked, surprised. "I'm his father," Emily called from inside. "He's allowed." But the guard shook his head, citing some new rule about limited capacity, an excuse that felt hollow. The tension crackled. As other couples streamed past, laughter trailing behind them, Marcus felt the weight of exclusion settle on his shoulders. Inside, Emily's best friend Samantha caught sight of her father's empty wheelchair and rushed out, heart pounding. "Mr. Williams," she whispered urgently, pulling Principal Hayes aside. "He's out there and they won't let him in." Hayes's face flushed. She hurried to the door and found Marcus, hand on the arm of the guard, pleading. The principal apologized profusely, promising to sort it out, but as she reached to call security management, her phone buzzed with a text. "Keep capacity controlled. No exceptions." That message, sent from someone higher up, stung like a slap. Emily watched. Through a gap in the door, tears pricking her eyes. "They're trying to block you," she murmured, voice thick with disbelief. Marcus squeezed her hand through the crack in the door, offering a brave smile. "I'll get in, Em. Just hang on." But inside, he felt a storm brewing. This wasn't simply about capacity anymore. It was about principle, about respect for a man who had sacrificed so much for his country. Word of the situation rippled through the small town. By early evening, the local news crew had already arrived, cameras recording the guard's stern face as he refused Marcus entry. The headlines began to form. "Disabled veteran denied at prom?" The community buzzed with outrage. Veteran organizations posted on social media, questioning how a man who gave his hearing and almost his life for his country could be turned away from his daughter's prom. The local VFW chapter called the mayor's office, demanding an explanation. Still, the school board stood firm, citing safety regulations and fire codes. But everyone knew fire codes had never stopped anyone from escorting a disabled veteran into a school dance before. Emily sat in the corner of the gym, tears sliding down her cheeks as the music played on without them. Her friends wrapped their arms around her, whispering words of comfort that felt hollow. Through the distorted echo of party music, Emily's eyes locked on Marcus's wheelchair, parked just outside. He was striving to navigate the uneven pavement, the strains of his body evident in every push. Suddenly, a shrill note of bugle sound cut through the chatter. Across the street, in a modest rehearsal hall, the Marine Corps band was on break. Staff Sergeant Olivia Martinez, a clarinet player, scrolled through her phone and stumbled upon a social media post about Marcus's ordeal. Her heart sank. She glanced at her fellow bandmates, trumpeters, drummers, tuba players, each absorbed in their own world. "Guys, you need to see this," she said, holding her phone up. The band fell silent as they watched a clip of the guard refusing Marcus entry. A deafening hush fell over the room. "That's one of our own," whispered Lance Corporal James Fisher, once stationed with Marcus overseas. "We can't let this stand." The youngest drummer, Private First Class Aaron Lee, shook his head, anger flashing in his eyes. "He fought for our freedom," Lee said. "He deserves to be at his daughter's prom." In an instant, unity formed among them. Their mission was clear: bring Marcus in and make sure he felt the honor he'd earned 1,000 times over. With military precision, the band piled instruments into vans and set off toward the high school. The clatter of drums and flicker of brass reflected their resolve. As they approached, they saw Marcus by the entrance, silhouetted by the fading daylight, refusing to give up. Emily spotted them through the window, her eyes widening in disbelief. The band filed onto the lawn, instruments gleaming under the hallway lights. A sergeant stepped forward, tapping his shoulder insignia against the guard's chest. "Corporal Jenkins, I see you recognize this man." The guard faltered. The sergeant continued, voice steady yet firm. "Sergeant Marcus Williams is a disabled veteran who served with honor. You will escort him inside." Jenkins swallowed, flipping through his clipboard, but his voice cracked. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't know." Behind them, the band tuned up, the trumpets sharpening, the drums steadying. Marcus inhaled, his chest rising with cautious hope. "We're playing the Marine Corps hymn," the sergeant added quietly. "Stand by to march. Hymn in." Suspense rippled through the small crowd gathering, cameras rolling as everyone waited to see if tradition, respect, and duty would finally win out. Marcus reached for Emily's hand and gripped it. His heart throbbed. Was this really happening? The gym doors loomed ahead, looming like a fortress he was about to breach. Inside, the music paused abruptly, all conversation halting as the band's opening notes echoed through the hallway. The Marine Corps hymn, a melody of sacrifice and honor, heralded their approach. The crowd parted, leaving a path lined with stunned faces. Marcus's eyes glistened with unshed tears. He paused just before the threshold, taking one last breath of cool night air. Emily squeezed his hand tightly, tears reflecting the flickering gym lights. They were a unit, father and daughter, ready to face whatever came next. Around them, the band stood at attention, wary and resolute, instruments poised like sentinels. The guard stepped aside, saluted shakily, and watched as Marcus rolled forward, the hymn swelling into a triumphant chorus. They crossed the threshold, and the gym erupted into applause. Friends, teachers, and neighbors rose to their feet, hats flying in the air. Marcus inhaled sharply as the cheers washed over him, the weight of exclusion lifting. Emily's smile was radiant, her eyes shining brighter than any prom light. For a moment, everything felt right in the world. But as they moved toward the dance floor, Marcus noticed Principal Hayes approaching with a stern expression. In her hand was a paper, an official notice threatening to fine the school for capacity violations if he remained. Chaos rippled, Across the gym floor as whispers spread. They might still kick him out, someone muttered. The band faltered in mid-note, uncertain if they had truly changed the outcome. Emily glanced at her father, concern flashing in her gaze. "Dad, what's happening?" she asked, voice trembling. Marcus squeezed her hand again, leaning close so only she could hear. "Stay with me, honey." But even as the brass section raised their instruments for a rousing finale, neither of them knew if the fight was over. The prom's festive decorations, balloons, streamers, and rose petals now seemed precariously balanced between celebration and controversy. The gym's doors stood open, a silent invitation to the uncertain night ahead. Outside, the county sheriff's car pulled up, headlights carving long shadows across the lawn. Marcus felt his chest tighten. After everything they'd been through, the battlefields, the surgeries, the lonely nights, this was supposed to be a simple father-daughter moment. Instead, it had become a battle for respect and dignity. The Marine band fell silent, their presence a silent challenge. Would they defend him or watch him be forced out? Inside, Emily's dress dipped and swirled as she waited, breath caught in her throat, for the next move. The cliffhanger hung thick in the air. Would a disabled veteran, a father, finally get to walk his daughter across that gym floor? Or would bureaucracy and fear steal her prom night dreams? The Marine band's trumpets lowered and the gym's strobe lights flickered. Everything teetered on a knife's edge, and only one thing was certain: no one would walk away unchanged. The gym lights flickered as the sheriff stepped inside, boots echoing on the polished floor. His presence felt heavy, like a gavel about to drop. Marcus paused, the Marine Corps hymn still lingering in his mind, and watched the sheriff's eyes scan the scene. The gleaming instruments of the band, Emily clinging to his hand, and the principal holding that ominous notice. It was a moment Marcus never expected. Back home, he had faced mortar fire and improvised explosive devices, yet here, a simple paper warning threatened to undo everything. He took a breath and steadied himself, remembering the nights he trained for this kind of test, even if he never imagined it would come in the shape of a high school prom. Principal Hayes felt perspiration bead on her forehead. She had once admired Marcus for his service, but now she stood between a decorated veteran and the law. Earlier that week, she had stayed late to clear the accessible ramp and asked custodians to move supplies. She had assured Marcus that nothing would stand in his way. Yet behind her polite smile, the school board's ultimatum had echoed in her mind. No exceptions under fire code. She remembered the late-night meeting when the board member, Ms. Crenshaw, had warned, "If we make a special allowance, we open the door to everyone demanding special treatment." At the time, Hayes had promised herself she would find a way to help Marcus. But now, standing before the sheriff, she felt the weight of that promise clash with reality. Her hand shook as she adjusted her glasses. "Sheriff Thompson, thank you for coming so quickly," she said, her voice wavering. Sergeant Williams, needs to be here with his daughter." The sheriff nodded, his face unreadable. He glanced at the note in Hayes's hand, then at Marcus's band of Marines, and finally at the prom decorations. Balloons and streamers that suddenly looked absurd against the tension. He cleared his throat. "Principal Hayes, I understand the citation, but I also understand what Sergeant Williams fought for. I'm going to give you 10 minutes to figure this out so this family can have their moment without violating any codes. After that, I'll have to enforce the fire code." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Emily's friends gasped, clutching each other. The band members snapped to attention, grips tightening on their instruments. Marcus felt a knot twist in his chest. 10 minutes to resolve it or lose his daughter's night forever. Back in the parking lot, Sam, the band's bugler, overheard students talking about the story on their phones. "Did you see? They're actually thinking of ejecting him," a junior whispered. Sam shook his head, anger flaring. He thought back to the first time he saw Marcus at the VA clinic where the veteran had taught him to play taps. Now, Sam couldn't stand to see him humiliated. He gripped his trumpet and marched back inside without permission, determination in his stride. Alongside him came Private Lee, drumming a quiet beat on her knee, and Corporal Fisher, tuba slung over his shoulder like a shield. Each step they took was an unspoken promise they wouldn't let Marcus down. Inside the gym, Emily's vision blurred as tears threatened to spill. She squeezed her father's hand and looked up at him. "Daddy, I don't understand. Why would they do this?" Marcus knelt beside her wheelchair, catching her gaze with his steady brown eyes. He brushed a strand of hair away from her face and forced a gentle smile. "Sweetheart, sometimes people forget what it means to stand for someone. It's okay. We'll get through this." Emily wanted to believe him, but her throat tightened. She had seen her father in pain after surgery, part of his hearing gone forever, but never so uncertain as he was now. She thought of how he taught her to ride a bike despite the limp that slowed him, of how he cheered her on at every soccer game even when he could barely walk. The injustice of being turned away on her prom night cut deeper than she expected. Meanwhile, Principal Hayes consulted with Vice Principal Santos, whose expression was a mix of frustration and sympathy. Santos explained, "We can move some tables, clear standing room in the back corner. Fire code gives a little leeway if people are not obstructing exits." Hayes nodded, quickly sketching a rough plan on a scrap of paper. Yet she knew it was a gamble. If the gym's inspector showed up unannounced, they would still find Madge. Her bookkeeper had counted capacity without accounting for wheelchairs. The subplot of district politics pressed on her. One wrong move and she'd lose her job. Her phone buzzed. It was Ms. Crenshaw's text. "Do not make us look weak." She swallowed hard and tucked the phone away. She owed Marcus an apology, more than one, but there was no time. She motioned to Santos. "Start moving tables now. Get more staff to help clear the ramp and open the side door for standing room. And notify the fire marshal we're adjusting capacity." Outside, the red lights of the sheriff's car glowed through the gym windows. Parents gathered on the sidewalk, some shaking their heads, others calling friends to share the news. Disabled. Veteran may be forced out of daughter's prom. A few whispered about suing the school. Others talked about organizing a protest. In the distance, a local news van idled, its camera crew readying to roll. Nobody noticed the assistant coach, Mr. Patel, slipping away from the crowd and heading toward the concession stand. Patel had been one of Marcus's fellow soldiers during a brief stint in Afghanistan. He had seen Marcus's courage during ambushes and had sworn an oath to always watch each other's back. Patel approached Marcus, voice low. "They're jacking up fire code to keep you out, but I talked to someone on the board. They're afraid of bad PR once this goes national. Stay put. We'll get you in." Marcus felt a surge of hope, but also a fresh wave of anxiety. He turned to Emily and whispered, "I've asked Coach Patel to help us. Just stay strong." Emily nodded, wiping her eyes, and watched as her father exchanged a tense nod with Patel. In that moment, she realized, her father was not just a parent. He was a soldier in a different kind of battle. The gym doors remained open, and the music paused. The band assembled in a loose semicircle, their instruments poised for a resumed hymn, ready to march Marcus to his place. Even the security guard, Corporal Jenkins, lowered his head, embarrassed, knowing he'd misjudged Marcus's worth. Suddenly, a commotion erupted at the edge of the gym. A group of senior girls, Emily's closest friends, stormed in, confronting Principal Hayes with folded arms and furious eyes. "You can't make him leave," one girl said, voice trembling with anger. "He fought for this country. He deserves better." Another teen handed her phone to Hayes, showing a stream of social media posts and support hashtags. "Veteran honored. Let him in." The noise rose, and the sheriff shot a glance at the principal. It was a clear signal. Public sentiment was turning against the school. Hayes forced a calm smile. "I understand how you feel. We're making adjustments right now." She pointed behind her. "The back corner will be cleared and the fire marshal is on his way to inspect." The girls exchanged relieved looks and hurried to rearrange chairs themselves, rallying under Emily's leadership. Behind the scenes, a local pastor, Reverend Clark, slipped in, having heard of the conflict on his way home from an evening service. He laid a consoling hand on Marcus's shoulder. You have my support, Sergeant. Let me know how I can help. Marcus managed a thankful nod. He thought of how his faith had carried him through dark nights overseas, and now he felt that same faith strengthen him for this fight. The hallway lights dimmed as the gym settled, the collective breath held in anticipation of the fire marshal's arrival. Outside, the siren of the news van was a low hum of looming judgment, ready to beam this story across the county. As minutes ticked by, the band lifted their instruments. The trumpets glinted, the drums quieted, and Sam raised his bugle to his lips, eyes locked on Marcus, waiting for that silent cue. Play, and let the world know that a disabled veteran belonged here. At that moment, Principal Hayes rushed in, speaking in urgent whispers to Vice Principal Santos. "He's here," she said, nodding toward the door where a tall, older man in a blue uniform had appeared. It was the fire marshal. He paused, looking over the gathered crowd. The band members at attention, the sheriff standing near Marcus, the principal gesturing excitedly toward the rearranged seating, and Emily standing firmly beside her father. The fire marshal cleared his throat and everyone's eyes turned toward him. "I've inspected the gym," he said, voice carrying over the hush. "With the cleared area at the back and the wheelchair space, you're good for tonight." A cheer rose from the crowd, the tension snapping like a taut wire. Marcus exhaled, relief and pride swelling in his chest. He looked down at Emily. Her eyes shone with relief, and knew this moment was real. Behind him, the Marine band lifted their instruments, Sam's bugle tipping toward his lips. But before that triumphant note could ring out, Jenkins, the guard, exhaled and reached for his badge. "Sergeant Williams, sir, you have my apologies. Please continue." The guard's voice wavered, but there was genuine respect in his eyes. Marcus inclined his head, jaw tight with gratitude. Outside, the news camera zoomed in as the first note of the Marine Corps hymn sounded, echoing through the gym and out into the night. The crowd erupted in applause, cheers of, "Thank you, Marine," "Band," and "Father and Daughter," blending with the hymn's steady drumbeat. Emily's friends joined hands, tears streaming as they watched Marcus wheel himself onto the dance floor, the band's polished brass creating a corridor of honor. For a brief moment, all the conflict, bureaucracy, and doubt melted away. A disabled veteran who had given so much for his country was finally being honored, just as he deserved, on the most important night of his daughter's life. The climax was at hand. The hymn rose to its final crescendo, and Marcus steeled himself for that walk down the aisle of light and music, knowing that nothing would ever dim the memory of this night. The Marine Corps hymn swelled through the gym, each note echoing off the walls and filling every corner with a sense of pride and purpose. Marcus wheeled himself down the makeshift aisle formed by his fellow Marines, their polished brass glinting under the gym's lights. Emily stood at the edge of the dance floor, her eyes shining as she watched her father approach. The music seemed to pause for a heartbeat, as if the prom itself had caught its breath, waiting for what would happen next. Marcus's hands gripped the wheels with determination. Every inch forward was a testament to the sacrifices he'd made, both on the battlefield and in learning to live with a disability. Around them, students and parents rose to their feet, many wiping away tears, moved by the unlikely journey that had brought a disabled veteran into the center of his daughter's prom night. As Marcus reached the center of the dance floor, the Marine band lowered their instruments and a sudden hush fell. For a moment it felt as if time stopped, his creaky wheelchair resting on the polished floor, Emily's dress shimmering beside him, and the pastel decorations hanging from the rafters looking almost ceremonial. But then, the unexpected happened. Principal Hayes stepped forward, her face flushed with relief and remorse. She held out a small framed proclamation, which, though informal, declared that Sergeant Marcus Williams is hereby recognized for his courage and commitment to family and country. Let it be known that his presence here honors us all. A cheer erupted, louder than any before, and the local news cameras zoomed in to capture the moment. Reporters jostled to ask questions. How did he feel? Emily, standing close to her father, whispered in his ear, "Dad, you're my hero." Marcus smiled, the weight of frustration and injustice finally lifting. He reached out and took Emily's hand, guiding her to stand beside him as the band struck a new chord, this time playing a softer rendition of God Bless America that seemed to wrap around them like a warm embrace. At that moment, Corporal Jenkins, the security guard who had first blocked Marcus's entry, stepped forward from the side of the gym. His uniform looked stiff, but his shoulders were slumped in genuine apology. He approached Marcus slowly, holding out his hand. "Sergeant, I'm sorry," he said quietly, eyes downcast. "I was just doing my job, but I didn't understand what you'd given for us." Marcus looked at Jenkins for a long beat, then stood as much as he could in his wheelchair and accepted the handshake. The gym fell silent as students nudged each other, whispers of "Thank you, sir," drifting through the air. In that handshake, a small but meaningful reconciliation took place, one that rippled outward, reminding everyone present that respect and understanding could conquer fear and misunderstanding. Meanwhile, Vice Principal Santos had slipped out to make a quick announcement over the loudspeaker. The school board had agreed to waive the fine and formally apologized for any oversight. The ripple of that news spread through the crowd. Teachers hugged each other, students cheered, and even some of the more reserved parents allowed themselves to smile freely. In the concession stand, Mr. Patel, the assistant coach and Marcus's old comrade, quietly handed Marcus a cold bottle of water. "You did good, brother," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You taught them something tonight." Marcus nodded, his throat tight, memories of the desert heat and sandstorms flashing through his mind. In this very moment, he realized that the fight for inclusion didn't always take place on foreign soil. Sometimes it happened in a high school gym, among festooned decorations and disco lights. As the band resumed with an upbeat melody, Emily guided her father to the center of the floor. The DJ cut the music, letting their footsteps mark the beginning of their father-daughter dance. For a few precious minutes, nothing else mattered but the two of them. Marcus held Emily close, careful not to lean too hard, and Emily rested her head on his shoulder. All around them, students dipped and spun, but their world felt still. She whispered, "Thank you for fighting for me, Dad." And Marcus kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for being my reason," he replied, his voice soft. Their dance was a quiet rebellion against every barrier they'd faced that night. The ramp clutter, the dismissive guard, the fear of exclusion. For Emily, those few moments meant more than any crown or corsage. They meant knowing that her father would never let anyone take away her joy. Behind the bleachers, a group of parents had already started a fundraiser. Some local businesses pledged to donate a scholarship in Marcus's name to help disabled veterans pursue education, promising to turn this prom night controversy into a catalyst for real change. Students passed around their phones, scrolling through a GoFundMe link that had gone live less than an hour ago, offering support for mobility equipment and healthcare for disabled service members. A hush of pride spread through the gym as Marcus's story of a soldier who lost part of his hearing and learned to navigate life in a wheelchair became more than just prom night drama. It became a community's promise to honor every veteran's sacrifice. As the night wound down, Emily led her friends in a final photo around her father, their laughs loud and genuine, their arms wrapped around him in solidarity. The Marine Band members quietly packed their instruments, their mission fulfilled. Sam the bugler lingered by Marcus's wheelchair, adjusting his cap in a solemn salute. "Sir, you remind us why we signed up," he said. Marcus reached out to ruffle Sam's hair. "And you remind me why it was worth it," he replied. In the corner, Principal Hayes pinned a small American flag onto a bulletin board labeled Veteran Heroes, ensuring that Marcus's name would be forever etched in the school's memory. The echo of laughter and music faded as the last slow song wound down, leaving space for reflection. Emily walked her father to the door, the cool night air greeting them as they stepped outside. The lights from the gym spilled onto the parking lot, where the local news crew waited for one last interview. Marcus, shaking slightly from the adrenaline of the evening, rested his hand on Emily's shoulder. Reporters circled them, but he looked past them toward the small crowd of neighbors and friends, some cheering, others wiping tears, knowing that their support had turned the tide. He spoke into the camera with quiet conviction. Every veteran deserves respect. Every parent deserves to walk their child into prom night. The cameras blazed a spotlight on that truth, capturing faces nodding in agreement. As they drove home, Emily in the back seat with her prom photos, Marcus stared out the window at the passing streetlights. His thoughts drifted to days in the desert and nights in hospitals. Remembering both the weight of his injuries and the lightness of nights like this one, he realized that his greatest victory wasn't just setting foot or wheel on that dance floor. It was showing his daughter and his community that, even when life tried to block you, perseverance and solidarity could pave a path forward. Emily reached into her purse and handed him a small framed prom photo, her in the lavender dress, him smiling wide. "To remember tonight," she said. Marcus smiled, tears glinting in his eyes, and nodded. In the quiet of their home, as the lights dimmed and the notes of the Marine Corps hymn faded into memory, Marcus reflected on the night's lessons. He had learned that systems could fail, but communities would rise. He had shown Emily that courage wasn't just war stories. It could be standing up for what was right even when it felt like an uneven fight. And he had reminded everyone who watched that a disabled veteran's place was anywhere his loved ones needed him. Prom night had begun as a simple father-daughter milestone, but it ended as a testament to resilience, unity, and respect. As father and daughter settled into bed, Emily tired yet glowing, Marcus content despite the ache in his knee, he whispered, "We did it, Em." She replied sleepily, "We did, Dad." Outside, the night was still, but the echoes of what they'd accomplished lingered in hearts and headlines, ensuring that no one would ever forget how a Marine band's stand at prom changed a community and a family forever.